when it comes to the interest that can emerge in us to discover who and what we truly are. The word awareness is such a central and important word in teaching and realization. And awareness is not so much something to be understood, but to be directly experienced. And so traditions of self-inquiry, they tell us to rest and abide and watch and witness our experience and recognize that the experience is a composite of thoughts, emotions, sensations, energy, perception, association. But to notice that there's always something noticing that. So thought arises, and there's an awareness of thought. Emotion arises, there's awareness of emotion. But what is making awareness aware? Are you? Well, of course, you are. If you know yourself as that, as awareness, as the transcendent witness. Even that isn't the right way to put it, because awareness is happening on its own. That's why it's likened to be our true nature, to be our true self, because you can't negate it. Awareness is always there, no matter what arises. Contraction, there's something aware of contraction. Expansion, bliss, love, energy, oneness. There's something aware of that, always. And so the invitation to rest as awareness, to abide as awareness, is, we could say, the direct path into that recognition. We can notice that there's thoughts, emotions, sensations, and then we can notice there's awareness of that. And so the pointer, or the practice, is to just rest as that awareness. Don't try too hard. It's a relaxation that's called for. Relax into that awareness. And when you relax into that, you can notice there's no boundary to it. It's not inside, it's not outside, it's everywhere. If you just relax and in this moment look, is there an edge to that space of awareness? Is that awareness inside of your mind, inside of your body, or is your body and your mind inside of that? And so we can say that awakening to true nature, that's where the entry point is, into resting as that awareness, recognizing that who and what we are is that awareness. And it's not so much a recognition to be had to hold on to, or that we can put into our pocket and say, I'm awake, or I'm enlightened, or however we want to term that. There's actually a utility to that, because when we rest as that, we recognize as a byproduct there's a sense of internal freedom and looseness that comes. Otherwise there wouldn't really be too much of a point to waking up. But awakening and enlightenment is tied together with liberation and freedom. And so when we rest as that witness, as that awareness, we can recognize inside, oh, there's an okayness, a looseness. Why? Because we're resting, our identity is resting in the space that's watching and holding the experience, and it's not tied into the experience. It's not too tightly held within the thoughts and the beliefs and the emotional contractions. Those can still be there, but they're allowed to pass through a lot more easily. And that's a huge internal resource of freedom and calm and peace when we can do that. That's why words like awareness or resting as awareness or abiding as space, the space of awareness, the witness, the transcendent witness, or more correctly or intimately, the witnessing. Even awareness, it's the awaring. It's not a something that you can find. It's a recognition that it's happening. So it's resting as the happening of awaring. And to recognize that that happens on its own. It's not so much to try to be conscious or try to be aware. It's more about relaxing more and more and more and more, and recognizing in a lighter and looser way that that awareness is just happening. Nothing's causing it. It's natural. Awakeness and awareness is the natural state. Not to be achieved or developed, but to be recognized that it's happening. And we are the happening of awareness. And maybe, if not initially, but eventually that awareness is recognized to be non-separate from that which we witness. Initially, the pointer is to separate that awareness from the objects of our experience. And that pointer is given because the natural state of most people is to be identified with mind and emotion and experience. We don't recognize that we're something different than that. So the pointer is to orientate the awareness to transcend the mind, get out of the mind, get out of the emotions, get out of even the body sensations, recognize this spacious, unbounded awareness, the witness, the witness, the witness. And it's like anything, the more we put our attention on something, the more we recognize it. And on some level, that's all that an awakening experience is there's a spontaneous or caused by more of the effort of sitting or meditation or a whole host of other things that could happen. There's a massive disidentification of the mind from awareness. And because we are the awareness, what the internal experience is, oh, I'm not the mind, I'm the witness. And then we can be pulled back into identification. And so we go back to that practice, whether it's in meditation and sitting and abiding, or whether it's during activity and there's just a discrimination that's going on. Oh, okay, there's thoughts, there's contractions, but what's aware of that? And not so much just as a belief or an understanding. It's more about finding that place in your experience where you can relax that space open. Because you are that, you can sort of shift your own awareness into that space. And there's an endless number of portals for that to open. Relaxation is the key, though. You can use the senses. Listen for stillness, listen for silence, as opposed to the form or the vibration or the sound. And you can't do that if you're rigid or you're tight. You have to relax. Relax open. Likewise, the visual field. Allow the periphery to open. Relax open. And when you do that, likewise, there's a spontaneous opening of awareness. More space comes into your experience. Relaxation. The body as well. Resting in the body, allowing the body boundary to open, to relax. Feeling presence in the body. Which is a beautiful portal because we're already dropping out of the mind. To feel, we have to be outside of mentation. The mind or thinking or mentation is a commentary of reality. It's an abstraction. But reality, or true nature, or even awareness is alive. So we can feel awareness in the body. Of course, awareness can be experienced as the transcendent witness, which completely transcends all experience. And there's a truth to that. But simultaneously, there's also a truth in the recognition that that awareness can be embodied, and that experience of awareness can register in the mind-body. And that's experienced as presence, energy, subtle energy. As it drops into the heart opens, and so of course there's the experience of love. And beyond just the experience of love with the heart opening, there's also likewise the experience of unity. Non-separation between awareness and the world of the senses, the body, the thoughts, the emotions, the energy, non-separate, all one thing, superfluid wholeness. And so that's the recognition of unity or unity consciousness. It's not just the transcendent witness, the witnessing awareness that's watching the energy and the thought and the form and body sensation. We could say it's a deeper recognition, it's a more embodied recognition. It's where that awareness drops into the body, drops into the lower chakras. Not to get too conceptual here, but we can say that the experience of the transcendent witness is the up and out movement. That's why it's called waking up. It's literally an energetic up and out movement, out of the mind body. The seventh chakra cracks open, and you experience yourself as the transcendent space. But the embodiment process, we could say, is the natural deepening of this recognition, is when that awareness loops back into the mind body. Now when that awareness loops back into the mind body and starts flowing, it's awareness flowing through the mind, you experience the clarity. The clarity of discrimination is the base clarity, discriminating awareness from the objects of your experience, the real from the unreal. You can see it, not understand it. You see it with awareness. That's where the true clarity comes from. This is part of the rewiring and the embodiment and the reintegration of this recognition, is that the clarity that comes, that appears like it's coming from mind, is actually coming from awareness. It's the saturation of presence and awareness into the mind. And there's a literal change in the physiology. Neural networks are changed in the body and the emotions. This is why there's a sense of things can be shaken up. Because the identity, the mental identity, is not just thoughts. That's one aspect of it. It's a major aspect, thinking. But if we looked at even the word thought as being a multimodality living entity, that there's thinking to thought, but there's also emotion and sensation and contraction and core beliefs and perceptions that go along with it. And this is why a powerful shift, a deep penetration of an awakening experience can really shake up the system, because the system is not just thinking. It's an entire psychological network that represses things in our system. It distorts reality to match our identity and our core beliefs. That which is called ignorance in the awakening teachings is not so much a smart or dumb ignorance. It's an ignorance of who and what we are as awareness. When we know ourselves as awareness and we see with awareness, there's clarity. But when we see with the mind, it's distorted. When we see with the identity, it's distorted. And it's distorted with more than just thinking. This is why at a certain point on the awakening path and journey, we'll recognize that just transcending our experience, just resting as a witness, is not enough. There's a limitation to it. It's a very powerful part of the awakening and the resting and the abiding and the practice that comes along with the embodiment and the deepening and the penetration of awareness into the mind-body. But what we'll find at a certain point is there's certain levels of contraction and identification that just aren't penetrated when we're resting too far away, too detached. Although there's a lot of freedom that can come in that. There's certain parts of the contraction and identity which are linked into the deep unconscious that aren't shaken loose. And so this is why a lot of the teachings, they invite us to re-enter into the body, into the heart. And it's not said so much necessarily as a forceful action to force the attention into the heart and into the body, although there may be some use. It's a more relaxed invitation, because you're inviting awareness, you're inviting the witness to drop into the body. And he'll naturally do that with relaxation. And so it's a relaxing into the heart. And if you can just get a feel of what I'm speaking about, there's a way where you can witness emotion, contractions in the heart, contractions in the body, and you can rest, and you can watch, and you can see, almost in a sense of not being affected at all, because there's clear awareness watching it. But when you get closer to the heart, when you get closer to the body, there's an energy field. And we can resist allowing that awareness to drop into that, because we can have this memory trace where it's like, if I go in there, I'm going to get caught. I won't be free. I don't want to feel that. And so at that point, that's where usually someone they'll tighten. They can even know themselves as awareness, as the witness, but when emotions come up, when they're triggered, there's a point where it just, the threshold is reached, and the muscle of presence, the ability to transcend, is come to its limitation, as I call it. There's too much gravitation attempting and threatening to cause identification, and that sort of reverse motion to go into the witness is not quite strong enough. So there's that point, there's that microsecond where what are you going to do? And this is where all of the more feminine teachings, the body-centered and the heart-centered teachings, they come in, because the invitation here is, don't fight it. Relax into it. And the relaxation initially might be a little painful. You might not like it, because we don't like to feel pain. We don't like to feel contraction. We like to feel space and openness and bliss and love and ease. But if you're finding, maybe not initially, and maybe not even for years or decades, but if you're at the place where you've recognized this dynamic, this pattern where you can transcend it, and in times of ease and meditation and when you're alone, it's easy and you can just be as clear as day. You're a completely awakened Buddha. And then other times when you're triggered. And in the spiritual world, there tends to be this place where there's almost like this spiritual ego that goes along with it, so that when you feel something, there's almost a natural denial that comes. Because you're supposed to somehow deny that you're a human being now. There's no person. There's no me. So if I admit that I'm experiencing fear or anger or shame or guilt, there's something wrong, or I've lost something, or now I'm not awake or something. This is likewise another invitation to let go of the witness or the awareness-based teachings. Of course, we are awareness and we're not the ego, but the fully awake state of awareness is completely inclusive. It's not a denial of the humanity. It is the humanity. It's everything. It's divinity. It's the demonic. It's the light. It's the dark. It's the human. It's the divine. It's God. It's everything. It's all one thing. They're all aspects of one thing. There is an awareness in humanity. There's one thing. And it manifests as a contracted state, which we call the egoic identity, and an expanded state. And beyond. But back to that practice of embodiment and resting in the body and in the heart and in the emotions and the sensations, it's on some level, it's a invitation to welcome these emotions. Part of it, in time, it's revealed to be the most effective way to deal with our experience. Because constantly avoiding it or contracting against it or pushing against it or even attempting to constantly transcend it, at a certain point, that is a fixation as well. It's a good fixation. It's much better than just being caught in the mind. But I'm speaking, this is, we could say, a more advanced state. When you know that awareness and can rest as that witness, and you can experience freedom from that, not just you had a glimpse and you're walking around with the concept I'm awareness, but when you can actually directly experience that and experience the freedom and the liberation that comes with that, at that place when you can rest more easily and effortlessly as that, but you're finding simultaneously there's this other aspect of your experience that you're not free in, that's where the invitation is to lean into it a little bit, relax into it. Feel the emotions. And it's not so much because there can be this invitation in psychology and in psychotherapy where you just feel your way through, you feel your way through. And there can be this sort of impulse to just go into the darkness, go into the unconscious, just for the sake of going, because there can be this feeling sense, if I just go into the darkness, into the unconscious enough, eventually I'll get to the end of it. And this is, of course, what we find, those of us that have practiced and been involved in emotional work and psychotherapy for years, is that that actually isn't the case either. Psychotherapy and emotional work is very good for that invitation to get in touch with the body and the emotions. It's basically saying it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to have these emotions. There's good reasons why you have them, why we all have them. And the psychological understanding really teases out these complexes and these reasons for protecting ourselves from our emotions and the world and others. It's very tied into that identification of separation. emotionally and energetically speaking, this is a very harsh place. We're born into this world wide open, innocent infant, no protection at all. And then we're hit with the reality of how most of life is. And most of us won't go unscathed. It's very rare for someone to have a perfect childhood. And even if we do, adulthood is pretty gross and contracted and unconscious. So there's good reasons why the contraction is there. There's good reasons why the identification is there. It's protection. This is why when we enter into these contractions and these emotions, there needs to be a sense of honoring and gentleness and patience, instead of this rigid and almost unfeeling sort of clarity. There's a usefulness to that, to just basically say, enough, wake up now. Because if you don't have that sort of strength of clarity and resolve and commitment, the whining of the contracted emotions will go on forever. So there needs to be firmness. But too much firmness puts too much pressure on the unconscious. And the tender petals of the heart, they need softness and patience. So there can be strength of clarity. And the clarity is to rest as awareness, to always bring awareness. But I'm speaking about a much more advanced place than just normal psychotherapy, because I'm talking about bringing awareness to the emotions, dropping in as awareness and presence into the heart, into the body, and feeling. And when you do that, you have a resource that you don't have from the egoic state. You're dropping in with the field, and the field has an infinite space and patience and gentleness and peace. And this is the true deepening, when we drop in with awareness and presence. And we can still have contraction, but the more we drop into it, the more we relax into these emotions and these contractions. There can simultaneously be a contraction, but there at the same time there's an awareness. You can feel things like anger and fear, and still there's something that's there that's not that. It's clear, it's open, in the midst of the hurricane. And so what you eventually begin to recognize, what's unfolding, is that there is a way to, we could say, transcend, or maybe more correctly, to navigate the energy currents and the emotions of life in a way when you can be free and embodied, as opposed to just being transcendent. You can be free while you're feeling negative emotions, while you're feeling emotions and experiences that you don't like. There is a deeper freedom than just transcending your experience. It's a more embodied transcendence, we could say. It's a place where you can be okay with feeling whatever's happening. And simultaneously, as there is a relaxation and an openness to feel whatever is here, simultaneously there is a relaxation of needing to know who we are. We can be awareness, but we can also be presence, and we can also be unity, and we can also be oneness, and we can also be emptiness. We can recognize that all these qualities are different dimensions of ultimate reality. And likewise, we can be human. Because where this is going is that it's not just about transcending the humanity. The embodiment is really about that awakening penetrating into the humanity. And when I say humanity in this context, I'm talking about the unconditioned nature. Who are you as an unconditioned human being? You know who you are as unconditioned awareness. But what does an unconditioned human being even look like? And deeper, how does that unconditioned human beingness interact with another unconditioned human beingness? I sometimes like to talk about things like awakened relationship. And this is what I mean by these words. If you're awake and you're free, not just on your own when you're meditating or you're by yourself, but you've experienced a level of freedom and penetration of that awareness and that presence into your mind body, where there is an ability to stay centered and free in the midst of emotions arising, contractions, triggering. And I'm not talking about being perfect. That to me is a non-issue. And especially when we talk about in the context of awakened relationship, there's a way when enough presence contacts each other, where it's almost like we become one entity, meaning that our presences, our consciousnesses merge. And so our level of presence comes together and we hold each other up. And that can't happen if we're just in the witness space. The heart space needs to be open. And the only thing that contracts the hearts, that prevents the heart space being open, is all those reasons why we feel we need to protect each other from both ourselves and others. On some level, there's no end to working through the emotional stuff from the stuff. But if enough awareness is brought to the stuff, that's the resource of healing and integration and freedom of the heart. Freedom of the heart. That's what everybody's looking for, the eminence. And we find the freedom and the liberation and the looseness in the eminence by knowing the transcendence. And then eventually allowing that transcendence to re-enter back into the heart, into the